How's everybody doing today? It's a really cold day out there, so please stay warm. And the reason for this video is in response to my previous video where I mentioned and I said this that contributing to RSPs, don't buy into the hype essentially. And just to reiterate that video, what I was saying is this. I'm not saying RSPs are a bad idea. I think RSPs are a good tool to plan. They're a good tool to plan for your retirement, for your future, to save on taxes. And as great a tool they are, they're just a tool. And not all tools work for all circumstances or all situations. Some tools may work in certain circumstances, and some tools may not work in other circumstances. Now, I got a lot of comments and got a lot of feedback on that video. And so I thought that I would actually respond to a few of the comments that I got that I really want to address, two in particular, maybe three. One of the comments was that RSPs are good for everybody, regardless of your income level. That comment I will address in a subsequent video because I actually want to do a case study to show why RSPs don't work for everybody, don't work for every income level. But that will be for another video. But the comment I wanted to address today was the argument to making RSP contributions over debt repayments. Now, in many cases, if you look at the math, I will concede that making an RSP contribution mathematically makes more sense because when you look at the pre-tax numbers and the cost of the debt, in many cases, you can make a strong argument that your RSP contribution would take you farther. However, personal finance is more than just the mathematics of it. Personal finance is a combination of, yes, the mathematics of it, but also the emotions and the habits that you've developed over years and your personal financial situation and where you stand as an individual, as a family. And so even though in some cases mathematically it makes sense to make an RSP contribution, depending on where you are, especially when it comes to debt, it might be better off paying off debt. And one of the comments, actually one of my mentors showed me an article that talked about this very much. And I very much agree with the article that mathematically makes sense. But one of the comments the author made was the folly of emergency fund. And he showed the numbers as to why, an emergency fund maybe earning 1-2% is not a great idea. It's better to put that money into an RSP, into something like a mutual fund or stock or an ETF that has a better potential for growth. And also because you get the tax break on it. And even though that makes sense mathematically, he even suggested that what he does is that he gets ensures his clients have like an open line of credit or a secured line of credit that they can use in the case of emergencies. And then the money that they would put in an emergency fund, use that money towards an RSP contribution. Now, even though that makes sense mathematically, it's not what I would recommend for everybody because unfortunately, when it comes to debt, not everybody knows how to manage debt properly. Because once you have that credit card or you have that line of credit open, all of a sudden, things begin to crop up in your life that are deemed emergencies, even though they're really not. There was a meme I posted maybe a couple of weeks ago that says, if you buy $1,000 item for $900, you haven't saved $100. You've actually spent $900. And when there's these open lines of credit on credit cards, there is a tendency to very easily accumulate debt. This is not for everybody. I mean, I have a client that a few years ago we were planning for. He was trying to go back to school, and knowing him, he's very good with money. He's a good he saves very well, spends very well, takes care of his credit. In his case, I told him, yes, let's use your line of credit, about 40,000 or so. Let's use this towards your tuition fees, and then would pay back over the year as you work. Because one, he was a high income earner, and he was also very good with managing money. And so what we did was we actually did take the money out of the line of credit and we used it to pay his tuition fees. But within that 1 year, we paid off that line of credit a combination of aggressive savings, a combination of bonuses received at work, a combination of tax refund. And so in some cases, yes, that argument does make sense. But in some cases, it doesn't, because once you have access to these lines of credit, if you don't have the personal discipline to use it properly, then you can very easily accumulate debt. I personally always recommend to stay away from using your credit card or your lines of credit as emergency fund, because you can very easily rack up debt. And that's part of a good advisor's job, is to help understand you as a client, your personal situation, and balance the math and the emotions and the habit of the individual to know that, okay, what's the best strategy in this situation? Do we pay off debt, or do we make RSP contributions? Now, the other reason why I'm addressing this topic is I saw an article just this morning that shows 46% of Canadians are at a risk of insolvency as interest rates rise. And so if you are at a risk of insolvency and you're finding it hard to manage your debt load, it makes no sense putting money into the RSP contribution, whether that's on a monthly basis or whether that's a big lump sum that you make before the March 1st deadline. It makes no sense to try and put these lump sums of money, or even if it's a monthly contribution, into an RSP. You need to tackle your debt, because if you are at a risk of insolvency, or debts or debt payments or interest payments are drowning you, it makes perfect sense to just take that excess money you have. Once you have a good budget, and that's what a good advisor can help you do. Once you have a good budget, is put that money towards your debt repayments rather than RSP. Now, one caveat that I might make is this: if your employer has a group RSP where they're matching up to a certain amount, in most cases than not, I always say make the RSP contribution, as one, because it's being deducted directly from your employer, and two, they're matching it because it's free money. And who doesn't like free money? If they're matching that contribution, then make the RSP contribution through your employer, because one, you get the RSP deduction, and then two, you get free money. And once you leave that employer, that money is all yours. But in all other cases, when you have a lot of debt, I often recommend to focus on paying off that debt first before that RSP contribution.